Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a main hand stone club and an offhand Longhaft Axe. I've been really enjoying the different movesets and kind of opportunities you get when running a mismatched setup like this, rather than, the traditional power stancing. And I find that it's very strong on a strength build. You get pretty good AR when everything's one-handed, but if you're two-handing things, you get even better AR. And we'll be running just 54 strength, which is pretty standard for level 125, but just the variety of attacks you can go for when you have a moveset like this can really keep your opponent guessing and apply some really great pressure. The Longhaft Axe can make for a great roll catch after your opponent rolls out of stun, and using something like a ravioli step or a crouching attack is going to make for a great way to continue the pressure. When it comes to Ashes of War, you have a lot of different options, but I really liked Flaming Strike on the Stone Club, as well as Sword Dance on the Longhaft Axe. I'll also boost those a little bit with Shard of Alexander, and then I really like the jumping attack when it came to the two-handed moveset on the Longhaft Axe, so I used the Claw Talisman, but you could definitely use something like the Green Turtle Talisman. Real quick, I want to jump into some thoughts about the moveset. So I would say the biggest thing is to not be afraid to switch between the two-handed movesets for either weapon. You're going to have 3 different options in terms of how you run this. If you want to do just a weapon in each hand, that's one option. The two-handed moveset on the Longhaft Axe or the two-handed moveset on the Stone Club. And all 3 of these kind of have different moments for when they're most useful. If you need something that does a lot of damage and has a lot of hyper armor but is a little bit slow, the Longhaft Axe is going to be a great play. This is especially useful if you're dealing with multiple opponents and you need, this running heavy that does a big swing that's going to hyper armor through a lot of damage, as well as catch multiple opponents for a stun. That can be really useful. If you're going for a quick chase down, you want to use the crouching attack with the Stone Club. That's going to be a great option. Having access to Flaming Strike is going to be really useful, both buffing your weapon and just as a quick get off me tool. And then using Sword Dance as a way to finish somebody if they're at half health is also quite useful. So a lot of versatility and variety when it comes to your approach for this. These don't have perfect synergy like a true combo, the crouching attack into a Longhaft Axe attack, but sometimes you will catch your opponents with those different movesets, and it's part of the reason I really enjoyed using these 2 together. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about this build and setup. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd definitely appreciate it, and let's go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, now starting off with this first invasion, we're going to have an isolated phantom here that's at the top of this kind of pit, and we'll take advantage of that fall animation and just get a nice plunging attack with our Stone Club, and we'll just let these other players kind of know that we're here by attacking both simultaneously, get them both aggroed so we can have more of a normal invasion situation here. So this player with the power stance straight swords is going to be a little bit scary, especially if they have priority on us, so we're going to be playing pretty carefully, and we'll be hoping to stun them with something like the Longhaft Axe and then maintain priority and continuously knock them out of stun, because if they go for their attack too many times, we're just going to eat a lot of damage. So using the Longhaft Axe in a two-handed moveset I found to be really helpful in an instance like this. Being able to go for an attack that kind of comes over your head is going to be a great way to knock out a power stance straight sword player from their jumping attack animation, which is so popular with that moveset. So we do really need to back off here, but here we can see the jumping attack get punished by the Longhaft Axe, and then the quick attacks that come out with the Stone Club are incredibly helpful for finishing off that player before they're able to really get out of there. And using the environment here is also really helpful. Just having these falling guillotines in the mix are, it means we can't aggress in the same way because we need to be aware of them, but it also means that we have something that can potentially block projectiles or do a whole bunch of damage on these phantoms. So we do end up with a one-on-one with this blue. They're very close to death, and when they go for their heal, we actually switch to our Longhaft Axe two-handed moveset, and then grab a Sword Dance for basically all their health. And it can be super useful to have an Ash of War like that as an Estus Punish, which is a true combo if you hit both hits, and just does so much damage, especially on the Longhaft Axe, which has a ton of AR already. So we do see another blue get summoned, so we don't actually begin aggressing the host. They're in a spot that essentially means their blue is going to be isolated, which we'd like to continue. And they're going for a lot of different types of frost attacks that have kind of big AoEs, so we're taking it slow. We don't need to rush in. The host is not participating, and we can just kind of figure out the right time to strike. So we go for a nice trade and do most of the health, the blue's health pretty quickly, and then switching over to the two-handed moveset, we get a little extra range with our jumping attack on the Longhaft Axe and do finish off that blue. Now, the host is quite alone at this point, and they're, mostly focusing on the PvE. I feel like they've forgotten about me or just expected me to die from the blue, but we're able to now aggress the host, and as they get kind of caught in this corner, we're able to go for Flaming Strike, which is just a great way to apply corner pressure, and we're able to come out with the victory there. So moving on, we have another 3v1, and this player is going for some of the Dragon Bolt Blessing, and we're applying some quick hits with the Stone Club and not really aggressing too crazily. We don't want to get caught in this hallway, especially if we have players behind us kind of blocking our exit. That can be problematic. And now the other Phantom has come into the world, so we're getting some nice stuns on these players, but are getting hit with some blood loss. And the stairs can be a really nice place to apply sleep pots, especially when you have really aggressive players like this, where they're just gonna keep mashing with L1s, and we can use our body to kind of block them from getting out of the sleep. So that allows us to deliver just 2 hits with the Longhaft Axe, and we come out with a victory against that first Phantom. Now we do need to look out for the Black Knife. That Ash of War can be a very annoying stun lock, and it just does continuous chip damage, so very problematic there, but Gideon here is not doing too much damage with their partisan. We're able to chase him down with the Stone Club and end up with another one-on-one with the host. So here we roll in for a backstab. That Ash of War is a little bit susceptible to it. The timing is fairly tight, but we're able to grab it, and then we go for a Ravioli Step. Don't go for the attack, but actually swap over to the Iron Cleaver, just because the fully charged heavy is a great way to catch an opponent for a last bit of damage, and it's very panic inducing. So that's kind of what we're going for in that moment. And next up we have another 3v1. We started off with a nice Frost Pot and just get everyone frostbitten, especially on a pure physical build. A Frost Pot can be really nice for just boosting your AR a little bit. Here our opponent was within one-shot range for Sword Dance, so we went for it, but we did get knocked out just because the other player had a Crag Blade Colossal Weapon, so pretty scary there, but we do get a nice jumping attack with the two-handed moveset on the Longhaft Axe and turn this into a 2v1. And we do definitely want to heal that Frostbite just because of the Cragblade Colossal in the mix. That's going to be doing a lot of damage if we don't pay attention to it. So we're essentially dealing with a one-on-one at this point because the wizard in the back was just focused on the PvE, and they've exhausted all their FP, and we're able to roll in and grab a nice backstab on the jumping attack. And here we get a very nice roll catch finish with Flaming Strike. I really love Flaming Strike as a roll catch. It could be so useful, especially as a wake up. As long as you delay it long enough after a backstab, you'll frequently be able to get your opponent. And here, this wizard goes for a number of attacks and has only 478 HP. So just one hit from Sword Dance is going to be enough to finish them. A bold move on the part of the host, but live and learn, I suppose. So moving on, we have what turned out to be a fairly difficult invasion here. We have a player running a bleed build with an offhand dagger, so that definitely demonstrates a little bit more meta knowledge perhaps. The frog hat can also mean 2 different things. Usually it's either a very good player or a very bad player, and then we do have to deal with a Rune Arc host that's got some Dragon Incantation. So we see some good pressure coming out from the player with the scythe, and we do need to back off a little bit. We're just out of range for their jumping heavy, which is pretty important, and we do manage to roll the winged scythe, which would have been, very problematic in terms of preventing us from heal. Even if we didn't get hit, we could have gotten phantom hit, and that status would have been applied. So we go for a running heavy and manage to catch the phantom, but now have to deal with some more frostbite damage from the host, and actually having been frostbitten previously meant that we took a little bit less damage from the dragon breath that time, so that was actually kind of nice. Now we're in this kind of surprise area where we can go around this pillar and go for Flaming Strike. The turn and burn potential with Flaming Strike is quite strong just because of the lingering hitbox, and we're going to go for that again. This was maybe a bad move to go into that little corner there. I could have gotten stuck between 2 different players that could have just been, continuously mashing, so I quickly got out of that spot, but it's worth noting, that particular position to be in is a position you want to get out of pretty quickly. We do now have a blue that's come into the mix, and they're running Power Stance Beastman Cleavers, so a bit of an odd setup, but I definitely respect it. And we are pretty low on health. We can see the Royal Remains armor giving us just a little bit of regen, which is kind of nice, and we wait for the effects of the Winged Scythe to wear off, and now, you know, swap back all of our stuff after we've gotten the little bit of extra HP that comes with the armor and talisman swap. Now this player goes for Carrion Grandeur, which is definitely a bold move. I don't know how good the scaling is on something like the Beastman Cleavers, but it's definitely fun to see. I like these off-meta builds, especially on the part of a blue. And they don't have a ton of health, but they're still maintaining aggression. And with very little health left, they go for Carrion Grandeur, and we're able to get a nice backstab there. We do throw a nice Frost Pot that gets our opponents to kind of separate a little bit, which is really nice. And the player with the Scythe goes for a fully charged heavy, and that had a lot more hyper armor than I was expecting. So it does end up to be a very close fight there. And maintaining aggression with my back to the host in that moment was probably a bad idea. Had that host run up the stairs and gotten me from behind, that would have been, you know, a pretty big issue. And here we can see what happens when you try to ravioli step into somebody who mashes out of stun. So not the roll catch that I was hoping for. They get a nice backstab, but we're able to finish them off fairly quickly now that it's just a one-on-one. So definitely an instructive invasion, and I feel like a lot of different elements going on in that one that resulted in a victory were pretty nice. So moving on, we have a 3v1, and this is definitely a bad area to encounter a 3v1, and fairly common one, I suppose, just because, you know, gankers really enjoy the frozen lake because there's virtually no cover and the landscape is pretty sparse. So we're going to run up the hill a little bit, try to get some verticality in the mix, try to get potentially, you know, rocks in the way of these spells, and we get the first Phantom here to pretty low health. Here in this moment, I think Flaming Strike was probably the right move. Had they kept aggressing, we would have done a decent amount of damage, but if I had gotten it off a little bit earlier, I think it probably would have connected. So an unfortunate moment, as well as I get kind of mixed up with which player is low on health, and the Phantom with the lowest amount of health is actually able to run away. And here we can see the hyper armor being pretty useful with the Longhaft Axe. We get the running heavy to trade with the halberd and do quite a bit more damage, or at least quite a bit larger of a percentage of their health, because neither of these Phantoms are running that much vigor. So 625 does quite a bit of their health, and then we're able to just utilize the hyper armor of the Sword Dance to hit both players and finish one. So that's a really important moment, I think, to kind of use the hyper armor that comes with Sword Dance and use it to punish some of the aggression, as well as just recognizing when your opponent is within one-shot range from an Ash of War like that. And here we see some aggression with a dagger on the part of the Phantom, and we're able to punish that with the Stone Club, which is going to do a lot more damage and have more consistent stuns. So that's going to be pretty nice, and now that it's just a one-on-one with the host, we can play it a little bit safe. They go for Carrion Piercer, but we're able to hit them out before they're able to get it out, and then I found the crouching attack to be really nice. It comes out with more speed and range than I think is obvious if you just kind of do it without attacking anyone. And here we get Phantom or Flaming Strike to connect, and then just one more hit with the Stone Club. So definitely a good invasion there. The terrain was a bit helpful, and we were able to avoid taking too much damage from just like spells and whatnot, and I think the terrain was a big part of that. So leading them up the hill a bit was probably a good move. Now moving on to this next invasion, we have some elevator shenanigans and some trap shenanigans, which I always enjoy. We'll be switching over to the Spiked Cestus because that has Endure on it, and I think, you know, I've ridden enough elevators in this game to know that having Endure is pretty much necessary if you're going to be coming up an elevator and you know that your opponents are waiting for you on the other side. So we're going to wait till we get close to the top, use Endure, and then just kind of assess the situation. We don't want to be super aggressive. Here we can use the trap a bit to get some damage on the players as they're stuck in their Ash of War, and we'll be using the trap quite consistently. I think these pressure plates, like knowing where they are and knowing to stay out of this kind of hallway, can be really, really helpful. And here we go for a nice jumping attack with the Spiked Cestus. The Spiked Cestus is going to be great for pressuring, so we're able to just run in with a running light attack and take care of that Phantom. Switch over to our regular setup with the Stone Club now that Endure is not really necessary. And here the host almost got a backstab, but the grab didn't connect, which was fairly unfortunate. And we run back now that a blue's in the mix, and we kind of are anticipating that while the host knows about the trap, the blue might not. Here the blue has an unfortunate moment where they go for Bloodhound's Finesse and just fall off the ledge there. So that blue is now taken care of. It's a one-on-one with the host. And we've got some, pretty consistent chip damage with the trap. So I always like to incorporate that and just kind of keep people guessing. Here we have a 3v1, and I go for some great bow shots very early, knock that player off of the branch, and begin shooting at the other Phantom, scene where the host is going to come into the mix, and as I'm just kind of traversing the level, I realize that perhaps the Phantom did not actually fall to their death, so we're going to need to switch over to some melee weapons, and we're going to get a nice plunging attack with the Longhaft Axe. We are sure to two-hand it because we want to maximize the AR for that jumping attack, and then here we're able to space their Moonlight Greatsword and get a Flaming Strike finish. So a nice moment there, and we can begin aggressing the host and the Phantom. Now, this is a little bit precarious with the PvE. The big fire attack that comes from the PvE can do like a problematic stun, as you can see here, where it knocks me to the ground and almost knocks me off the branch. So being a little bit more wary of that, I think, was a good move. So you can see me running up the branch and trying to avoid having that happen again and killing me. So we backed off a bit and we're trying to bait our opponents forward. The Phantom is doing a good job of using a shield against my arrows, so that's definitely a good play, although you can shoot the arrow behind the shield if you get the arrow to hit on the ground in the right spot, and that can potentially knock the opponent off a ledge or just do a lot more damage than if you hit the shield. So we can see a substantial amount of latency coming from the host, which we do need to be wary of, as well as some golden parry attempts coming from the Phantom. So both those things are pretty scary to deal with. We haven't used our mixed physic either, so we're taking more damage than we normally would, but we are able to get a nice guard break on the Phantom here, and I was actually expecting the damage not to connect. It seemed to be a little bit delayed, and I thought it was going to be one of those moments where you don't get any damage from your riposte, so I was happy to see that connect, and we are able to take care of the Phantom. Now, it's just a one-on-one with the host. Not super scary. Eleanor's Pole Blade, there are lots of different ways to kind of counter it, especially if they go for the Ash of War too many times like this player is. But the latency and the bleed do make it a little bit more sus. Fortunately, we have the hyper armor associated with the Longhaft Axe and Ash's War Flaming Strike to just, knock this player out of whatever attack animation they're going for. And here we can see some delayed hits coming out with quite high bleed. So that was a little bit dangerous of a play right there, but it does work out in our favor, and we can kind of maintain priority. Now, next up we have a 2v1, and I wouldn't say this is the best 2v1 of all time. I had definitely some moments where I got a little bit too aggressive and managed to hit my teammate. So if you were my teammate here, I definitely apologize. Right there, that running heavy, intended to go for the Phantom here, but actually got mostly the red. So I'm focusing mostly on the host that's running Power Stance Straight Swords, and here again I really like the Longhaft Axe as a way to counter Power Stance Straight Swords, just because it really kind of stops your opponent in their tracks when they go for jumping attacks. I'm also trying not to maintain pressure on just the host, especially when we have a Phantom that's running an Ash of War like Stormcaller, which, if you don't do anything about it, they can really just deliver hit after hit. So I'm trying to make sure that if Stormcaller is going on, it won't hit my my Co-Invader. Unfortunately, I managed to hit my Co-Invader in that moment, so another hit there, just trying to be aggressive and cover them, but actually managing to hit them. So we're dealing a decent amount of damage, and I feel like we're in a bit of a better spot. The host is really focused on me. They're not attacking the Phantom at all, or the Co-Invader, so that's actually pretty helpful. I think they should have been swapping a bit between the two, as I was. We also have a fair bit of latency, so you can see some of these attacks that come out just they look like they connect on my screen, but they don't. Like this jumping heavy looked like it should have hit, but it didn't. But we do get this player stuck in a corner and go for Flaming Strike. Unfortunately, we're out of FP for the follow-up, but the Stone Club is going to be nice for at least applying a lot of pressure. We do end up resetting back to neutral, so I get some FP back and make sure that I have a fair bit of health, and my Co-Invader is going for some sleep grease on the Nagakiba, which I don't definitely see a lot, but I like the idea. And now we have this host that is really booking it. So I switch over to an HTS, use a little bit of handy tech to actually get that second attack fairly quickly. And the Co-Invader does a great job of continuing the pressure with the Nagakiba and going for a spinning slash for the finish. So a nice 2v1 and just kind of a fun invasion there. Now next up we have a 3v1, and this one was kind of funny. We have one Phantom that is really not running much that's going to be helpful. They have almost no armor on and very little vigor. They go for Stormcaller immediately, but we are able to hyper armor through at least the first hit and finish them off. And now we just need to look out for the AoE that comes with the Radahn Greatswords. And just the host is, kind of taking advantage of the fact that we're in a pretty small space. So I'm not playing too aggressively, and here we can see that being very helpful as this Phantom goes for Grail's Roar, which just does so much damage and can, really put a damper on things. We back off a bit and try to, go up the train a little bit, see if there's going to be a better way to aggress and also get some health back. The host is now out of FP, so that gives us a second to just kind of regroup, and we switch back over to the main hand Stone Club and get some quick hits in. I felt like if I stayed too much on the Longhaft Axe, I would kind of get the predictable attacks in terms of the slowness of them, so being able to switch over to something like the Stone Club, especially with Flaming Strike, can be very helpful. And here we go for what was a very risky backstab, but ended up working, and we do manage to get both the host and the Phantom. So a nice moment there, and we move on to the next one. So this was, it started out as a 3v1, but the PvE was going to be a pretty big factor. Here we go for a Ravioli step as this Phantom is backing off. The hit doesn't connect, so we switch over to the two-handed moveset on the Longhaft Axe, trying to get some running heavy attacks, which I definitely enjoyed. We do get hit by a giant fireball as we're continuously aggressing on the Phantom, but one Phantom has now died to the PvE, so it's now a 2v1, although the Power Stance Curved Sword player is still very much in the mix, but we've definitely aggroed some aggressive PvE. So we go for a nice delayed jumping attack, and that does connect. This player is doing a good job of kind of switching between aggression and non-aggression, and then we do get caught with the Twin Blade that does a lot of frostbite damage, and then we also have poison in the mix, and we also have bleed in the mix. And in this moment, I probably should have gone for Flaming Strike while that player was going for their crossbow hits, although if I had gotten hit by the crossbow, it probably would have bled me and knocked me out of it. So it's a tough call in that moment to say whether or not that was correct or not, but we do have a lot of blood loss, and we need to be wary of whether or not that's going to proc and do a bit of damage. So we've gone up into a situation where our opponents are now going to have to jump to get to us, which is great for the Great Bow. So we do get one successful hit off, and then as the host comes in, we catch them with Flaming Strike, but the other Phantom now has Reduvia, and we really don't want to deal with that. We want to make sure that we're covered for our heal, and some PvE does come into the mix, which makes our job a little bit easier. As this Phantom is going for Reduvia on the PvE, we're able to hit them with a couple Longhaft Axe hits, and the host is not able to protect their Phantom. And it's now a bit of a tough situation for this host. So they are Rune-Arced, and they have a somewhat strong weapon, but I think had they switched back to the Twin Blade, they probably would have been in better shape. Here we try to get a backstab just by walking around them. We don't actually manage to get it to connect, but we go for our Sword Dance as they are kind of caught in this corner. Now, a blue has been summoned in, and here we're hoping to get a backstab, so you can see me trying to strafe around with the just kind of blocking. We don't actually get it, though we get the grab, and we do manage to connect a running heavy with the Longhaft Axe. Now we switch back over to the Stone Club because we'd like to apply a little bit more pressure with some of the quicker hits that come with the Stone Club, and the host does begin backing off. Now blue has shown up behind me going for Blasphemous Blade. I go for my Flaming Strike Ash of War and do quite a bit of damage. They didn't have a ton of HP, and the PvE is going to be enough to finish them off. Now, it's just a one-on-one with the host. They've exhausted pretty much all their resources, and they stop walking, which is a little bit of a scary moment, and we get the predictable disconnect. So a fun invasion there. Unfortunate that they disconnected, but we can move on to our final one. So I'm not going to say too much for this, and we'll just enjoy it. Our our first opponent is running the Nagakiba, and that usually means that they have Spinning Slash in the mix, so we'll be sure to just maintain our aggression and get the poise breaks before they get hyper armor, and that's super important. We can see how that works out several times in our favor. We're able to come out with a nice flawless against this player, mostly because we continue to mash. Next up we have an opponent running a Curve Sword, and I played this one very closely to them, and I don't know if that was really the right way to go. We can see that we're really just staying in tight and trying to apply aggression with both our different weapons, keeping them guessing and avoiding their attacks. So they go for a nice heavy attack. We're actually able to jump their follow-up light attack and get a decent amount of damage. Now they're playing so closely to me as well that I'm able to go for Flaming Strike. I was hoping to get a backstab here. They go for the follow-up, and I am actually able to get a backstab on that follow-up. So a nice quick duel and a nice flawless there. One where, playing closely can be a little bit dangerous, but it can pay off, especially if you have Flaming Strike in the mix. Next up we have a player with Power Stance Nagakibas, so definitely seeing the katana meta coming out these days. We're going to aggress a bit with the Stone Club, just baiting an attack and following up with the Longhaft Axe, and here we can see we're very effectively able to trade with the Longhaft Axe. Now they do bait a roll out of me with the Unsheath Ash of War, or what I thought it was. Turns out to be Moonveil, so we do need to back off a bit, and we do need to be wary of that. We're actually able to roll the correct timing for that second Moonveil attack, and they're going for some L1s, but we continue to pressure with the Longhaft Axe. Now we go for Sword Dance, and it doesn't manage to connect. Waiting until they were a bit more aggressive and trying to get a trade would have probably been the optimal move. They are using Bloodhound Step though, so we're going to need to switch over to something like the Stone Club, which is going to be a little bit faster. We're hoping to get a nice Flaming Strike as they begin to aggress a little bit more, but we can actually trade with the Stone Club into their Moonveil and come out with the victory. Now, I was AFK for the first couple seconds of this duel, but we do end up facing a Gugs player running Rot. Now, this player was definitely, they had very solid movement. They go for maybe a few too many jumping light attacks, which are a little bit predictable, as well as punishable with the Longhaft Axe, and just the recovery animation is quite long. So I think perhaps fewer of those and maybe more crouch pokes would have done this player well, and you can see as they go for just a normal light attack, they're in a pretty good spot to get out some damage, although they've lost a decent amount of health along the way, so it's just a pretty, not a close fight anymore, and as they swap over to the Royal Remains, we're able to catch them with Flaming Strike, anticipating that they're going to be backpedaling a bit. Now, moving on, we have another player with Gugs, and this is going to be an interesting showcase of backstabs. So this player was running Bleed on their Gugs, so even though they weren't hitting me too often, the amount of blood loss was quite significant, and we're able to roll in and get a backstab on one attack. We go for Flaming Strike as the wake up, and you can see how long we delay Flaming Strike here, and that allows us to actually get it to connect. The lingering hitbox is quite long, so if you take a number of steps, you're oftentimes going to be able to get it to connect rather than going out just immediately. Now we're going to play this player a second time and again be going for some backstabs, and we're going to take into account the fact that they are running Bleed. So we're able to space their follow-up attack. They go for a crouch poke. They get some blood loss in the mix. Now I'm very close to being bled, and here you can see I get bled. The first time I take a hit, my blood loss meter is quite high, and this time I roll the blood loss proc, and that actually cancels my roll and allows me to get a backstab more quickly than if I had rolled. So sometimes you're able to use status procs as a way to kind of negate some of the necessary iframes that are associated with rolls, and you're actually able to grab a backstab more quickly than if your opponent had not hit you with the status proc. Next up we have El Presidente. So this player is around in a lot of streams these days, and just a player with great fundamentals overall. They're running just a straight sword, and they're actually able to get a nice perfect block there. So while they did take a decent amount of damage, it's always nice to see perfect blocks in the mix. And here we're able to just kind of maintain aggression. I think everything was coming out perhaps a little bit faster than they were anticipating, and we're able to come out with a victory against that player. Now we do have another Uggs player. This one is also running Bleed. We can anticipate that just by the white max, and they are going for War Cry or something that's going to change their heavy attack. So that's going to make their heavy a little bit slower, and also mean that they are going for an overhead attack, which is also susceptible to backstabs. Now we're able to get in an attack while they're in their heavy attack animation and actually roll out before anything happens, so having a quick weapon like the Stone Club can be quite useful in a moment like that. Now we're spacing just a little bit, and here again we're able to just roll out before they're actually able to get their heavy attack to connect. And here we're able to roll in, trying to go for a backstab. We don't get it to connect, but they roll in towards us, and they get hit with Flaming Strike. So just a nice way to finish, especially if you have a player that's rolling in a lot around you. Now, this player goes for an early Freezing Pot, so we're going to be also looking to connect the Freezing Pot. They go for a jumping attack with Power Stance Greatswords, which has a fairly long recovery animation, so we're thinking about backstabs, as always. We go for a couple attacks with the Stone Club and the Longhaft Axe. Don't get anything to connect, but we did get our Freezing Pot to connect, so we're at least a little bit up on health. We managed to get a nice anti-air with the Longhaft Axe and then begin pressuring a bit. And here we can see we're able to stun them with the first attack with our club, and then let's get a second stun with our Longhaft Axe. So that's pretty nice in preventing players that like to mash out a stun, and we just wait for a jumping attack and grab the crouching attack for the victory. So just a nice kind of run against a player that's, you know, potentially going to be able to do a lot of damage with Power Stance Greatswords. So here we saw in the first jumping attack, they were actually able to dodge the Longhaft Axe, and I found that the two-handed moveset definitely had a better hitbox for anti-airs, especially against Power Stance Greatsword. So my recommendation is definitely to use the two-handed moveset for anti-airs if you're going for the Longhaft Axe, and rather than just like the offhand moveset, because I do feel the hitbox is a bit better. There we were able to use the quickness of the Stone Club to catch them out of the air when they went for Raptors in the Mist. Moving on to the next player, they were somebody I played a number of times, and their kind of go-to move was to go for Poisonous Mist, and then if I was going to be using a Bolus after Poisonous Mist, they'd have swapped to the HTS and hit me with a running heavy attack. So I was definitely prepared this time and was able to punish it a bit. And then here we get a bit aggressive with the Stone Club since they are low on health. They attack, but we're able to Hyper Armor through that and come out with the victory again. Now, moving on, we have a player with another Gugs, and this is going to be the final duel of the showcase, and this was mostly just a whole bunch of backstab fishing, so I'm really trying to get better at fishing for backstabs against Colossal Sword players. So here we get a nice roll-in backstab. The timing is quite tight, obviously it's somewhat latency dependent. We do manage to reaction roll their Frostbite, although we do get the Freezing Mist to build up and connect. We roll it, but we are still Frostbitten, which can do quite a bit of damage. We go for a nice jumping attack with the two-handed moveset. We are looking for a bit of Hyper Armor, and also this longer stun that comes with the Longhaft Axe, and so we're just going to be two-handing that for the majority of the rest of this duel. They managed to get a nice delayed crouching attack, and we're in very low health range, but we're still aggressing quite a bit, hoping that we can grab that backstab that we've been hoping for basically the entire fight. So they go for a nice crouch poke, our block canceling, which is definitely a good way to avoid backstabs. Here we roll in, poke to grab it, don't get it to connect, which is unfortunate. Again, we are rolling in trying to get the backstab. Here they unlock, which allows us to get the grab, but doesn't connect. They get a grab on us, and finally we get the grab that does connect on them for the victory. So once again, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd appreciate it. I appreciate y'all making it this far in the showcase, and I hope you have a good one.